Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! The brass doorknob reflected a distorted image of anxious eyes and trembling hands. A deep breath echoed in the cramped dormitory room, filling lungs with resolve and expelling doubt. The moment of truth had arrived. Andrew's fingers traced the smooth fabric of the burgundy gown laid out on his narrow bed. The silky material whispered promises of freedom and authenticity, a siren song that had grown impossible to resist. For years, he'd suppressed this part of himself, burying Andrea beneath layers of starched uniforms and rigid expectations. But tonight, everything would change. The military academy's annual Founders Ball loomed large, a glittering affair steeped in tradition and decorum. Cadets were expected to attend in full dress uniform, a sea of identical figures moving in lockstep. The thought of once again donning that suffocating costume made Andrew's skin crawl. No more hiding, no more pretending. Tonight, Andrea would step into the light. With meticulous care, Andrew began his transformation. A steady hand applied foundation, erasing the last traces of masculine features. Contouring softened his jawline, while a dusting of rose gold highlighter accentuated newly feminine cheekbones. False lashes, painstakingly attached, framed eyes that sparkled with newfound confidence. "You've got this," he whispered to his reflection, voice pitched higher than usual. "This is who you are." The gown slipped on like a second skin, hugging curves that Andrew had long kept hidden. The bodice, adorned with intricate beadwork, caught the light with every breath. A daring slit revealed a glimpse of leg, while the flowing skirt swirled with each step. Andrew, no, Andrea, twirled experimentally, relishing the feeling of freedom. A spritz of jasmine perfume completed the ensemble. Andrea took a final look in the mirror, hardly recognizing the radiant young woman who stared back. Gone was the awkward cadet, replaced by someone elegant and self-assured. She smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from her dress, heart pounding with equal parts excitement and terror. The corridor outside was mercifully empty as Andrea made her way towards the grand ballroom. The click of her heels on polished floors echoed like gunshots in the silence. Each step brought her closer to a point of no return, closer to revealing her true self to the entire academy. There would be no going back after tonight. Music and laughter drifted from behind the ornate double doors of the ballroom. Andrea paused, one hand on the cool metal handle. This was her last chance to turn back, to retreat to the safety of Andrew's life. But the thought of spending another day, another hour, trapped in that suffocating existence was unbearable. "Here goes everything," she murmured, and pushed open the door. The cacophony of the ball washed over her like a wave. Hundreds of cadets in immaculate dress uniforms mingled with faculty and distinguished guests. The air was thick with perfume, cologne, and the heady scent of possibility. For a heartbeat, no one noticed the newcomer in their midst. Then, like a ripple spreading across still water, heads began to turn. Conversations faltered mid-sentence as eyes locked onto Andrea. The string quartet stumbled, a discordant note piercing the air before the music ground to a halt entirely. In the sudden silence, Andrea could hear her own pulse thundering in her ears. Whispers erupted like wildfire, spreading through the crowd with dizzying speed. Andrea caught snatches of conversation, her cheeks burning. "Who is she? I've never seen her before. Is that allowed?" She lifted her chin, refusing to wilt under the scrutiny. This was her moment, and she would not let their judgment diminish it. With deliberate grace, Andrea took a step forward, then another. The sea of uniforms parted before her, a mixture of shock and curiosity etched on every face. At the far end of the ballroom, Andrea spotted a cluster of senior officers, their chests glittering with medals. Among them stood Colonel Harriet Blake, the Academy's stern commandant. The older woman's eyebrows shot up as she caught sight of Andrea, her expression unreadable. Andrea's stomach twisted with nerves, but she forced herself to keep moving. She had known there would be consequences for her actions tonight. Whatever came next, she would face it with her head held high. As she neared the center of the room, a familiar voice cut through the murmurs. "Andrea? Is that really you?" She turned to find Jason, her roommate and closest friend at the academy, staring at her with wide eyes. His mouth hung open in disbelief, uniform forgotten in his slack grip. "Hey, Jason," Andrea replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Surprise?" Jason blinked rapidly, as if trying to reconcile the person before him with the Andrew he thought he knew. Wow, you look incredible." A tentative smile tugged at Andrea's lips. "Thanks."
"I feel incredible."
Before Jason could respond, another voice cut through the crowd.
"What is the meaning of this?"
Colonel Blake strode towards them, her expression thunderous. The other cadets scattered, leaving Andrea exposed in the center of a rapidly expanding circle. She squared her shoulders, bracing for impact.
"Cadet Thompson,"
the colonel barked, using Andrew's surname.
"Explain yourself immediately."
Andrea took a deep breath, gathering every ounce of courage she possessed. "Colonel Blake, I apologize for any disruption I've caused, but I'm tired of hiding who I truly am. This is me, Andrea, and I have just as much right to be here as anyone else." The colonel's eyes narrowed, sweeping over Andrea's attire. For a long moment, silence reigned. Andrea could feel the weight of hundreds of stares boring into her, judging, questioning. She resisted the urge to fidget, to shrink away from their scrutiny. Then, to everyone's shock, a slow smile spread across Colonel Blake's face. "Well, Cadet Andrea," she said, emphasizing the feminine name, "I must say, you've certainly livened up what was shaping up to be a rather dull evening." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Andrea blinked, certain she had misheard. "Ma'am?"
"Oh, don't look so surprised."
Colonel Blake chuckled. "Did you really think you were the first cadet to struggle with gender identity in the history of this institution? We may be traditional, but we're not completely behind the times." Relief washed over Andrea like a tidal wave, threatening to buckle her knees. She hadn't dared hope for acceptance, let alone understanding. "Thank you, Colonel," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. The older woman's expression softened. "You've shown remarkable courage tonight, Cadet. That's a quality we value highly here. Now then," she raised her voice, addressing the room at large. "I believe we were in the middle of a ball. Maestro, if you please." At her signal, the string quartet struck up a lively waltz. Slowly, hesitantly, couples began to form on the dance floor. The spell of shock that had gripped the room began to dissipate, replaced by a buzz of excitement and curiosity. Andrea found herself at the center of a whirlwind. Cadets who had never given Andrew a second glance now vied for her attention, eager to dance or simply chat. She fielded questions with growing confidence, explaining her journey of self-discovery to those genuinely interested. "I've always known, deep down," she confided to a small group of female cadets who had gathered around her. "But I was so afraid of what everyone would think, of losing my place here. It took everything I had to take this step tonight." One of the girls, a petite brunette named Sarah, reached out to squeeze Andrea's hand. "Well, I for one am glad you did. You're incredibly brave, and you look stunning." As the night wore on, Andrea felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. For the first time in years, she was truly herself, no longer constrained by the expectations of others. She danced until her feet ached, laughed until her sides hurt, and reveled in the joy of finally being seen. Not everyone was immediately accepting, of course. Andrea caught glimpses of disapproving frowns and heard muttered comments from some of the more conservative cadets. But for every negative reaction, there seemed to be 2 positive ones. She drew strength from the support of her friends and the unexpected allies she found among the faculty. As the ball began to wind down, Andrea found a quiet moment to slip away from the crowd. She made her way out onto a small balcony overlooking the academy grounds, grateful for a breath of cool night air. The sounds of the party faded behind her, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and distant crickets. "Mind if I join you?" Andrea turned to find Jason standing in the doorway, his expression a mix of curiosity and concern. She nodded, making room for him at the railing. For a long moment they stood in companionable silence, gazing out at the starlit sky. "So," Jason finally said, his voice soft. "Andrea, huh?" She nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "Yeah, it feels good to finally say it out loud." "How long have you known?" Andrea considered the question, tracing patterns in the condensation on the stone railing. "Forever, I think. But I've been actively hiding it since I joined the academy. I was so scared of what would happen if anyone found out." Jason's brow furrowed. "Why didn't you tell me? We're supposed to be friends." "We are friends," Andrea assured him quickly. "My best friend here, actually. But this, it was just too big, too scary. I couldn't risk losing you." Understanding dawned in Jason's eyes. He reached out, hesitated for a moment, then placed a hand on Andrea's shoulder. "Hey, you're not going to lose me. This doesn't change who you are as a person."
You're still the same brilliant, kind, slightly neurotic cadet I've come to know and respect. Andrea raised an eyebrow at his near slip, but decided not to comment. Instead, she leaned into his touch, grateful for the support. "Thanks, Jason. That means more than you know." They lapsed into silence once more, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Andrea could sense Jason struggling with something, his fingers tapping an anxious rhythm on the railing. "Can I ask you something?" he finally blurted out. "And feel free to tell me if I'm way out of line here." Andrea tensed slightly, but nodded. "Go ahead." Jason took a deep breath. Is Andrea who you want to be all the time now? Or is this just for tonight?" It was a fair question, and one Andrea had grappled with herself. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure yet. I know that being Andrea feels right in a way that being Andrew never has, but I also know that transitioning, especially in a place like this, wouldn't be easy. I think I need some time to figure things out. Jason nodded slowly, processing her words. "Well, whatever you decide, I've got your back, and I'm pretty sure a lot of the others will too, after tonight." Warmth bloomed in Andrea's chest, a feeling of acceptance and belonging she had never quite experienced before. "Thank you, Jason. Really." A comfortable silence settled over them as they gazed out at the night sky. The soft strains of music from the ballroom drifted through the air, a final waltz signaling the end of the evening. Andrea felt a pang of regret, not wanting this magical night to end. "We should probably head back inside," Jason said reluctantly. "Before they send out a search party." Andrea nodded, smoothing down her gown. As they turned to leave, Jason caught her hand, his expression suddenly earnest. "Hey, Andrea, I just want you to know, you really do look beautiful tonight." A blush crept up Andrea's cheeks, her heart skipping a beat at the sincerity in his voice. "Thank you," she murmured. As they re-entered the ballroom, Andrea was struck by how different the atmosphere felt compared to just a few hours ago. The initial shock of her arrival had given way to a sort of excited curiosity. Cadets who had never given Andrew a second glance now offered Andrea warm smiles and friendly waves. Colonel Blake intercepted them near the refreshment table, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "Well, Cadet Andrea, I hope you've enjoyed your coming-out party." Andrea couldn't help but laugh. "It's certainly been memorable, ma'am." The older woman's expression grew serious. "I want you to know that my door is always open if you need to talk. We'll need to have a more formal discussion about how to proceed from here, but that can wait until tomorrow. For now, enjoy the rest of your evening." As the colonel moved away, Andrea felt a surge of gratitude. She had expected judgment and rejection, but instead found understanding and support. It wasn't going to be an easy road ahead, but for the first time, she felt like she might actually have a chance at true happiness. The final notes of the last dance faded away, signaling the end of the ball. Cadets began to file out of the ballroom, many pausing to offer Andrea words of encouragement or simply to introduce themselves. She found herself surrounded by a small group of supportive peers, all eager to learn more about her journey. As the crowd thinned, Andrea caught sight of her reflection in one of the ballroom's gilt-framed mirrors. The woman who looked back at her was radiant, eyes shining with joy and relief. She barely recognized herself, not because of the makeup or the dress, but because of the confidence and self-assurance that seemed to radiate from within. For the first time in her life, Andrea felt truly seen. She had taken an enormous risk in revealing her authentic self, but the rewards had far outweighed her fears. As she made her way back to her dorm room, surrounded by new friends and old, Andrea knew that her life at the academy would never be the same. The future was uncertain, filled with both challenges and opportunities. But whatever came next, Andrea was ready to face it as her true self. She had taken the first step on a new journey, one that would lead her towards self-discovery and acceptance. As she bid goodnight to her friends and closed the door to her room, Andrea caught sight of her uniform hanging in the closet. It no longer seemed like a prison, but simply another facet of her complex identity. She wasn't sure yet how Andrea and Andrew would coexist in the rigorous world of the military academy, but she was eager to find out. With a contented sigh, Andrea began to carefully remove her makeup and jewelry. Each item she set aside felt like a small piece of herself, no longer hidden away, but proudly on display. As she slipped out of the burgundy gown, she made a silent promise to herself. No more hiding, no more pretending. From this night forward, she would live her truth, whatever form that might take. Exhausted but exhilarated, Andrea crawled into bed, her mind still whirling with the events of the evening. As sleep began to claim her, a small smile played across her lips. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations, and undoubtedly some difficult decisions. But for now, in this moment, Andrea was at peace with herself and the world around her. The Founders Ball had been more than just a coming-out party. It was the beginning of a new chapter in Andrea's life, one filled with possibility and authenticity. As she drifted off to sleep, Andrea's last conscious thought was one of gratitude. For her friends, for the unexpected allies she had found, and for the courage that had finally allowed her to be true to herself.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!